With you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. On that day, Jesus went out of the house and sat down by the sea. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat down, and the whole crowd stood along the shore. He spoke to them at length in parables, saying, "A sower went out to sow. As he sowed, some seed fell on the path, and birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky ground where it had little soil. It sprang up at once because the soil was not deep. And when the sun rose, it was scorched, and it withered for lack of roots. Some seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it. But some seed fell on rich soil and produced fruit, 100 or 60 or 30-fold. Whoever has ears ought to hear." The Gospel of the Lord. The parable in today's Gospel is about faith, that some people's faith falls on rocky ground and it doesn't survive. Other people's faith multiplies and thrives. But what we have to remember is that faith cannot exist in isolation. It has to be nurtured and nourished. There's a fallacy to people who say, well, I don't go to Mass because I don't get anything out of it, but I have a good relationship with God, because that faith ultimately won't survive. It has to be nurtured and nourished. If I can be personal for a minute and share with you how my faith was nurtured and nourished, it was done by two people. You've heard me talk in the past of my grandfather. He lived 2 doors away, and every morning from the day I made my first communion until I left for college, we went to Mass together at 10 minutes after 7. And I will confess it was not the lure of the Mass that pulled me, it was spending time with that old man. And then after Mass, we'd go to his house, and every Saturday he would bake a couple loaves of homemade bread. And in the morning, it was my job to make toast, and he'd fry some eggs and some venison sausage. He'd go off, he was station master for the B&O Railroad, and I'd go to school. And then every day from about the 1st of May till late October, I would be waiting for him when he came home, and we'd go to the family farm, which was about 4 miles away. He had 2 bachelor brothers and a spinster sister who lived on the farm. And I would help with his garden or weeding the garden or doing whatever on the farm. And then we would all sit down for a big dinner, and then we'd go home. The other person who nurtured the faith in my life was his sister, Aunt Mary. Aunt Mary was just a tiny little woman. She was blind. She did all the cooking, all the cleaning, all the canning. She was an amazing, amazing woman. She could sit at that kitchen table chopping up vegetables faster than I could imagine. And she'd take a poker and lift the cast iron stove and put another log into it. For some reason, they never put water in that farmhouse. It was built in 1854, a huge stone farmhouse. And at the kitchen sink, there was a great big pump, and then there was a wooden trough, and then a big wooden sink. And that was the only water that came into the house. I don't think beyond family, Aunt Mary had a friend in the world. The only time she ever left the farm was on Sunday morning to go to Mass in St. Mary's. And then on the summer afternoons, she loved to go. The farm next door was owned by another of her sisters, Aunt Madge and Uncle George. And she loved to go over and visit with Aunt Madge. The trouble was there was a gate because to keep the cows in, and she couldn't reach the latch on the gate. So I would walk her down to the gate, and I'd climb up the fence and unlatch the gate, and then she'd go through over to Aunt Madge and visit for the afternoon. Then she'd come back and cook a big dinner for all of us. Those two people, my grandfather only went to school to 6th grade. He was the wisest man I ever met. Aunt Mary never went to school a day in her life. And the thing I remember about them nurturing and nourishing my faith is that neither one of them ever talked about it. They never preached religion to me. I don't ever remember my grandfather talking about it. They didn't have to. They lived it, they breathed it, they inhaled it, they exhaled it. It was part of the fiber and the fabric of their being. Children do not miss a trick. If you want your children to have this faith, all you have to do is live it. Amen.